Hello and welcome to Talking Politics. Today we'll be talking about what drives politics at the local level. Are they national issues or are they local issues that have influences politics at the grassroots level? I have two guests in the studio with me today. I have Councillor Tim Pollard. He's the Conservative leader of the opposition in the London Borough of Croydon. You're very welcome, sir, to our studios.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And I also have Chidi Umez. He's a Conservative candidate, South Norwood, London Borough of Croydon. Chidi, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Both of you are involved at politics at the local level. And a lot of people have wondered because whenever there are local elections, only half of those that vote in the national elections come out to vote. They aren't sure, is this what we should be going for? Why should we vote at the local elections at all? So what really drives politics at the local level? Are they national issues or are they local issues?
I think it's a mixture of both. When you talk to people on doorsteps about whether they're going to vote, some people say, I always vote the same way, national or local. Other people do say to you, I vote this way in local elections and I vote that way in a national election. And some other people say, I don't see the point of voting at all. So, you know, there is definitely a mixture of both that drives local politics. And I think if you're actually a local politician, it's a little frustrating when someone tells you that actually they see the local election as a referendum on the government, because you know, it is really the opportunity that you have as a resident to influence what goes on locally and have quite a direct influence on how services are provided that you're going to use every day for the next 4 years. So you know, we really encourage people to take it seriously and get involved at a grassroots level.
Because let's look at an issue of Brexit now, and then when it finally takes place, the policies that will be decided, will they trickle down to the grassroots level or will they just be at the national level when it comes to Brexit?
The policies will affect everyone. So every council will see some effect of Brexit. I mean, we're part of London. London's a very cosmopolitan city. It contains people of every nationality. And nobody really knows what influence that's going to have on the workforce in 3, 4, 5 years' time. You know, we know at the moment that a lot of European Union nationals are living here and working here and making a big contribution to society. Are they going to stay after Brexit? Are they going to go back to their country of origin? Nobody really knows at this point. So clearly the effect is going to be felt everywhere. The effect's going to be felt on the housing market. You know, if we see a general exodus back to Europe, then that's going to impact on the housing market and is actually going to reduce some of the pressures that we currently see in the housing market. But in terms of what a council does every day, Brexit doesn't have a great deal of effect. It'll have a little bit of effect in terms of how a council does its tendering for contracts and who it works with, but actually the majority of the effect is on the people who live in the area rather than on the council itself.
No, I agree totally with what Tim said about local politics, because I see that local politics is about frontline politics. For instance, when I'm going door-to-door knocking, the sort of issues that concern people who are passionate about local politics has to do with the things like, say, fly tipping on their street. They're concerned about the issues of fly tipping. They're concerned about their high street. Now, that's what local politics is about. It's frontline issues that affect you on a day-to-day basis, rather than the national politics where you're talking about Brexit and so forth. So you do meet a lot of people who, when you knock on their doors, they start talking about Brexit, and you have to kind of say to them, well, yes, that's important too, but what about the concerns you have about, say, crime in your locality? Along those lines. So local politics is very essential because of the frontline nature of it, rather than the national level.
So when you go knocking door to door, you find a lot of people discussing to you what affects them at the grassroots level.
Precisely, and that's where Tim talked about. Some people think that by voting for at the national level, it means that they will vote for the same party at the local level. But sometimes that's not the case, because it's when you have local issues, the local council. Many people don't even know who is controlling their local council. They may know about the MPs and so forth, but they don't know who's controlling the council that delivers frontline services. And that's why people need to get involved with local politics, really.
Well, we have a clip here where Tim was actually having a meeting. It was a public meeting at the Norbury Council in Croydon, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Young man, before you go, I think it's a very refreshing note that you're coming up with, because for the past couple of elections, we never see anyone coming to the doorstep to find out what we want to have, you know.
Never seen it.
So, I've met you before on the doorstep, and after you went, I said to my husband, you know, if only we had more of this type of, you know, situation wherein we can say something. I'm a very shy person, but when it comes to saying what I have on my mind and someone to listen, it helps. And I thank you very much. And I just hope we'll be able to see either of you coming more often, because there are certain things I want to get off my chest. For instance, like the price of the green bin. I can't see why we're paying so much in our council tax.
Welcome back. That was Tim getting feedback about frontline services, a consultation with those in the borough. Tim, that was brilliant.
Thank you.
And you've been doing that. You've been going round the wards.
That's right. We were up and down, north, south, east, west in the borough. We've been having these meetings.
Let's talk about frontline services, for example, those under pressure like the NHS. And what is the council doing to actually tackle these issues? Because a lot of times decisions may be made at a national level that influences things like the NHS. So what is the council doing to ensure that those in the borough do not suffer?
One of the joys of being a councillor and being involved in delivering local services is that nobody quite knows where the limits of what you do are. So, for example, the NHS, the local council has an influence over the local NHS, but it doesn't control it. Whereas it does control other things. It controls how care is delivered to older residents when they've come out of hospital, but it doesn't control what happens to them in the hospital. So one of the difficult parts of having those conversations with residents is helping them understand what you can influence and what you can't. And when you say, I can't actually deal with that, all I can do is lobby on your behalf, I can't control it, it's not because you're being elusive or difficult, it's just because that's how the service is. But, you know, we expect too much, I think, if we expect everyone to know who delivers what and who they should talk to about exactly what. So our job as a local representative is often to be a sort of signposting service, if you like, you know, taking the complaint and saying, right, these bits we can deal with directly, this bit over here we can't, and we're going to talk to our colleagues over here, and this bit over here we can't, and we're going to talk to some different people about it. So it does confuse people, and one of the things I think would help enormously is more in schools, so that school children come out of school knowing who does what, because most people don't. They don't know what an MP does, what a councillor does, they don't know who controls what. And that would be enormously helpful as part of the sort of civic education that people have. But in terms of the local services in Croydon, and what people talk to us about mainly is sometimes with the NHS it's scare stories. You frequently hear that this hospital or that hospital is supposed to be closing. Usually it turns out not to be true, but it's very easy for these rumours to acquire a huge amount of momentum. But all councils are struggling with the issue of integrating care for older residents with hospitals, because what's congesting quite a lot of hospital beds is people who actually don't really need to be in hospital, but they can't get the care that they need anywhere else. So it's the council's responsibility to make sure that they get that care in their homes so that they can be discharged, so that the bed they were in can be then passed on to someone else who does need the sort of medical care. But the lovely thing about these meetings is that there's no agenda, the public meetings we've been holding. So I go into those meetings thinking, I know what I want to talk about, but that isn't what the residents want to talk about. And politicians always find that quite uncomfortable if you don't know what the subjects that you're going to be asked about are. But actually it's a really important part of our local democracy to give people that conduit so that they can come along and talk to you about what's on their mind rather than what you think should be on their mind.
If you become a councillor, I mean, your experience knocking from door to door, getting feedback from people about what they really want. What do you think, first of all, is their most immediate need from your experience knocking door to door? And if you become a councillor, how would you go about, resolving it?
Well, I think it's I mean, just touching on what Tim said about the consultation. One thing I've seen, even from door-to-door knocking, is that sometimes people blame national level politics for the failings, not realizing it's actually your local council that's failing you. And so when they're talking about, they may be blaming the Prime Minister, but actually in Croydon, for instance, it may just be the failing of the Labour Council. So that's one thing that people need to, they get educated about when they come for our consultations, and they realize, oh, okay, it's not really national, it's more local council failings. What people want, I would say that people want safer communities. That's one crucial thing. They want less crime, they want to see more presence of the police in certain areas. Like, speaking about South Norwood, I would say, they do want to see more of the police presence in South Norwood, because the police station was shut down in South Norwood, and so they want to see the police obviously out and about. People want to see cleaner streets. That's the sort of feedback I'm getting. They want clean streets, they want less fly tipping, they want, people, and more importantly, I think, in South Norwood, where they don't have a lot of the Labour councillors or so forth who come and consult with them, they want to see you coming to speak to them. And that's one thing that's very important, and they love it when I turn up on the front door in South Norwood and knocking on the doors, and even other areas in Croydon as candidates. Just the mere fact that you are coming to speak to them at their front door is a great thing. They appreciate it. They just want to see that you want to hear from them. So those are the key things, I would say.
Interesting. Well, team, let's go over actually and talk about housing crisis in Croydon. You said over the last 15 years, things have changed a lot. It used to be a rich borough, but it may no longer be that way because people are moving out. Now, what is going on with the housing crisis? Do you have, obviously, the houses aren't enough for the people, but what is the borough currently doing?
Well, London as a whole has a shortage of housing. As a city, it's expanded enormously in terms of the population. And whilst there are some parts of London where there is plenty of space that you can build more housing on, the East End, Greenwich Peninsula and so on, places like Croydon, which are already fairly intensively developed, have a real problem actually meeting the future need, because there aren't big empty spaces you can build in. What the council has been doing, and both parties have more or less followed this strategy over the last 10 years or so, is allowing Croydon town centre to become very much more intensified. So Croydon is actually a miniature city. If it wasn't attached to the edge of London, it would be something like the 9th biggest city in Britain in terms of its population, and it's got all the things you expect a city to have. But because it's on the edge of London, it's actually a town. So it's the largest town in Europe as a result. But actually, in the centre of Croydon, almost nobody was living there. Go back 10 years, there were a lot of business premises, there were a lot of entertainment, shops and so on, but actually almost no accommodation. And of course there you've got a huge potential for public transport. You've got East Croydon Station, which is one of London's busiest non-terminus stations. So you've got fantastic transport links up to London and down to the south coast, but nobody living there. So that's been greatly intensified. If you live anywhere in South London, you'll have seen the tower blocks getting taller in Croydon as Croydon town centre gets higher, because it's an area where that actual style of living works. It means that the residents there can't have cars in the way that if you live in the suburbs you might normally expect. If you're living in a tower block next to East Croydon Station, there's not a lot in the way of car parking. But the nice thing about Croydon, and what people who come to Croydon say to live, is that actually it's a real place. It's a place with history. It's a place that already has all the things you need. You're not trying to build a new community. You're just trying to intensify in the places where it works how the community works. And you've still got all of the suburbs around the outside, which ought to be kept reasonably low rise, and it gives you a nice variation in the type of housing that's available. But it doesn't really matter how much you build, it's never enough. One of the things we talked about Brexit earlier, one of the things we just don't know is what impact Brexit will have on the housing situation. It could actually help us, it may not, but until it happens, we're all sort of guessing.
Yes, and do you have any ideas of what Brexit is going to bring?
Well, it's a tough one. I think Brexit is still unfolding. It's really about whether, I know there's talk of soft Brexit, hard Brexit, but again, like Tim said, it's how it would affect boroughs. No one really knows what the final deal will look like. In Croydon, we have such a diverse community made up of, Eastern Europeans and everyone else. So it's a very
so you have a lot of Europeans in Croydon, and that definitely is going to affect things
Yes.
when Brexit takes
depends
place.
on what the deal is in Brexit.
Yes, we have literally every community in Croydon. It's a fantastically diverse place. We've got big Eastern European communities, we've got big African communities, we've got big Caribbean communities, South Asian communities, almost everything we have. Our primary schools deal with 40 or 50 different primary languages as the key languages that people speak. So it's actually much more diverse than people think, and much more diverse than it was 30 years ago. What we've sort of seen is that there's been a flip over really within London as to where people live. It used to be that the area that was affordable to live in was in that sort of ring around inner London. It's not now. So if people are finding that they're struggling to find places that they can afford to live in that sort of inner London ring, they're coming out to places like Croydon and in North London, similarly the outer suburbs. And that's changed the nature of the people who live there, and it's changed the type of services they want to see from their council and the services they need. We have to provide a completely different set of services from what the council would have done 25 years ago.
Let's talk about your manifesto. What should we expect to see in your manifesto? Are you still drafting?
We are still drafting our manifesto. Croydon is a strange borough. Everyone thinks that Croydon is quite an average place, because if you look at the statistics for most things, Croydon is average. What that hides is that actually there is immense wealth in parts of Croydon and there is immense poverty in other parts. So you put the two together and you're average. But actually what you need to provide for your population is completely different at the two ends of the spectrum. The boroughs to either side of us are much less diverse in that sense, so they're more average and most of their areas are roughly average. And that does affect how you deliver services and what kind of things are going to work. Croydon is, as we said just now, expanding enormously. And that's placing huge strain on the infrastructure. So we've got a lot more people living in Croydon, but we haven't got a lot more doctors' surgeries, and we haven't got a much bigger station, and so on and so forth. So really the next 10 years in Croydon is about delivery. It's about actually getting money from the government, from local taxpayers, from local businesses, and actually investing that money in the infrastructure of the town, because a lot of things are beginning to grind to a halt, and if we don't take those steps, that's going to have a huge impact on people's quality of life. So in terms of our manifesto, it's really about delivering. It's about stopping the talk and getting on with making the change that people want to see. We've been talking about the redevelopment of the main shopping centre of Croydon now for as long as I've been a councillor, and that's nearly 16 years. It's time to stop talking about it and
That's
actually
a long time.
do it.
Yes, lots of experience there.
Yeah, lots of experience, but not a lot of progress. So what we need to do now is stop the talk and get on with actually delivering the things that are going to make life better for the population over the next 15 years. But there are other areas which are not normally very conservative that we're putting into our manifesto. A policy we launched recently is about carers. We have a lot of people in the borough who are carers for somebody who isn't their spouse or one of their children. They're putting aside a lot of their own time to look after someone, and if they weren't doing it, the state would have to be doing it. And we don't really reward those carers enough. So one of the things that we launched a few weeks ago was the idea that we will give council tax discounts to carers, people who meet certain criteria, and the people who provide the most care to the most needy will get free council tax. And in that way we can make a sort of small repayment to them for the time and commitment they put in to looking after other members of the community. And I think that kind of thing is very important, and it's not the sort of thing you normally associate with the Conservative Party.
Yes, it's usually not. But I wanted to ask you, Chidi, you want to become a councillor, and the team talked about delivery. That's the key thing.
Right.
After 16 years.
Right.
So what would you do for the London Borough of Croydon when you become a councillor that would be very different from any other person?
Right. I mean, I think also the fact that I'm a Christian as well is very important, because what Tim mentioned at the last point about the policy for carers, I love that, because you're looking after people who necessarily are forgotten sometimes. You know, carers are essential. Carers, they play a very good part, a very important part in the community, but people don't necessarily know about them. So as a party, having actually decided to look at that problem and see how we can reward carers, I mean, that's compassionate conservatism, as one would say. I love that idea and I support that, because that's key. And also, in South Norwood, for instance, we have an issue with the High Street. Our High Street is disappearing. And we would love to have more diversity on our High Street. We want to have a High Street where people would love to stop and, you know, and have coffee and tea and have different variety of shops to attend. So South Norwood wants to see more of that. South Norwood also, from what I see, I'd love to deliver on the fly tipping issue, cleaner streets, trying to get some more funding towards South Norwood. I've heard a lot of people also on the campaign trail about people saying South Norwood is almost forgotten by Croydon Council because it's got an SE25 postcode. So it's not a Croydon postcode, it's a CR postcode. It's SE25. So they feel that they're treated as if they're forgotten by the council, but they need to be heard, they need to be provided for, there needs to be more funding coming towards South Norwood. That's the sort of things that I would love to see as a councillor. I would also love to work a lot more with the voluntary groups in the area, the residents associations, listening to them, the neighbourhood watchers and so forth, because we need to know that they are the ones also who live in the streets. So I want to be able to do a lot more consultation and listen to people and also deliver. Because I believe that the one key point that councillors have is the influence. And when you're able to use your influence for the good of your community, that's what really, you know, strength is for service. That's what I believe.
You mentioned the High Street. What exactly would you be doing to revive the High Street? Because if that works, then that can be applied to other high streets in the country. Because across the country, most high streets are closing down.
I think it's a lot looking at the development plans as well of that area to see how we can, what sort of the shops that you are having, the sort of businesses that you want to encourage. Along the lines of also regeneration of the high street. Don't let it go down into squalor. You know, don't let the look of abandoned shops that just look nasty. That's not a good image. That doesn't invite more people. So being able to do it up, and obviously work with landlords on that. So along those lines of the development plans for those high streets.
Are you going to be having incentives for people who want to come on the high street? Maybe I should be asking your team.
We over the last 15 years, the council's done a lot of work in this area. For some years, we were what's called a local enterprise growth initiative borough, which meant we got money from the government to assist with this kind of project. In a sense, what you need is your district centres to work with your town centre. Croydon's old in the sense that it has a city centre, but it actually has 4 or 5 other district centres that are significant district centres. They don't have huge shops, but they have a good variety, or they should have a good variety of shops. We've got Coulsdon, we've got Purley, we've got South Norwood, we've got Thornton Heath, and so on. And all of those places need to kind of work with the town centre. So the town centre can pull people from a long way to the huge shops, but that doesn't get rid of the need for the little boutique-y, more interesting, more creative, more diverse types of shops. But you have to create an environment where shopkeepers actually feel that it's a nice environment for them to work in, and they have a fighting chance of making their business succeed. Because the council isn't going to set up businesses, that's not what it does, and it would be terrible at it if it tried. But the council is there to sort of enable and to try and make those district centres become vibrant. But actually, Chidi is quite right. One of the things that puts people off going to local district centres most is a sort of sense of decay, a sense of dirt and squalor. And the council can be much stronger about that. And one of the things, another of the things that will be in our manifesto, is the council actually taking a lot more responsibility for finding and clearing mess. At the end of the day, the council doesn't make mess; it just clears it up. People make mess one way or the other. But the council at the moment is very passive. It kind of sits back and says, if you tell us about this, we'll clear it, probably, sooner or later. It'll happen. What we actually want is the council to be saying, we know where fly tipping happens. We know what the hotspots are. There are roads that I go down regularly, and every time I go down that road I see 35 or 40 fly tips. It's not hard to find. But the council can either sit back and wait for people to tell it about it, or it can go out and look for it. And that's going to be one of the sort of big things I think that this election will be about. And it's not glamorous, but it makes a big difference to people's lives and to the pride they can take in their community. If you go outside your front door and you just see mess, it doesn't make you feel good about life. We want people to have much more pride in their community, and we think the council can be much more proactive in making that happen.
Are there going to be little penalties for fly tipping?
There are already penalties for fly tipping.
Is that implemented?
Yeah,
that's the thing.
There are, and to be fair to the current council, it absolutely does its best in this area, but it could still do more. We need more mobile CCTV. The problem is that actually it's really hard to catch the people who are doing it, and the level of proof you need is quite high, which is why on one hand you could say, well, it's surely we should actually be punishing people who do it, and in that way we'll diminish we'll cut off the supply, because people will start to think, I'm not going to do it because there's a risk. You could do that. In a sense, taking it away faster almost encourages people to fly tip, because you're almost saying to them, if you stick your stuff out there, we'll come and take it away. So why bother with the bin? Just stick it out there. So you've got to get the balance right. But at the moment, what's happening isn't working, and the place just looks uncared for. It's actually not just fly tipping. It's simple stuff that people expect their council to deal with. Yesterday I was out in part of South Croydon, and I was up to about my calves in mushy leaves, and those leaves have been down for 6 weeks. Why are they still there? It's simple and not very glamorous stuff, but it's important, and it makes a difference to communities. So we're looking at reintroducing services like having a truck going around the borough that will take away the bulky goods, things like sofas and dining tables and so on.
We'll be ending on that, but just before we go, Chidi, can you just give us some last words? Why should people be involved in local politics, and why should people vote you?
Because if the local councillors, when we get it right, the quality of life would be much better. When at a local level, when you get that right, people's happiness it will be much better. That's the reason why, because the local politics is, like I said, day to day. Get involved in local politics, get to know who you need to complain to, speak to. It'll be good for us to hear, like you said, consult people, hear from them, speak to them. That's one thing I got involved in politics. I'm a problem solver. I see myself as a problem solver. I'm able to listen to people and try and sit down and sort out problems and see how to look at avoiding difficult obstacles. Why should they vote for me? Because I want to listen, I want to do something about it. I want to use any influence I have, if hopefully as a councillor, to influence for the better of the community of South Norwood. South Norwood deserves better than what they have. They deserve more funding. They deserve more consultation, more opportunity. That's what I'm looking to bring in South Norwood.
And we look forward to that. And Tim, last words just before we go.
The reason I always encourage people to get involved and take local politics seriously is because of the timescales. If you try to influence a national issue, it takes years, sometimes it takes decades. If you try and influence local issues, you can actually start to see effects in a few months or a year or two. So it's very rewarding in that sense that you can actually get some change, and you can get some reasonably quick change. So I really would encourage people, whatever their political views are, get involved with local politics, because it can make a real difference to your community, and it can do it fast.
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming to our studios. Viewers, this is Talking Politics, and we've been looking at the issues that drive local politics. What really influences politics at the grassroots level? Are they local issues or national issues? And I've been interviewing Councillor Tim Pollard, who is the Conservative leader of the opposition, London Borough of Croydon, and Chidi, who is a Conservative candidate, South Norwood, at the London Borough of Croydon. And if you have any questions, you can send emails to info@loveworldtv.co.uk. Enjoy the rest of our programs.